Welcome to episode 4 of the Carlson Cards podcast, where we interview longtime collectors to understand their process and strategies for growing a collection. In this way, we can navigate the hobby more intelligently and hopefully learn tips from every guest I have on the podcast. The guest today is an incredible collector of everything from baseball to basketball to football to hockey. You're talking just game-used cards of legends from history. This one was such a blast, and I really, truly hope you guys enjoy. And again, be sure to stick around till the end because literally this Mount Rushmore is incredible. All the tips, even in the Fast Five, are incredible. So I hope you guys enjoy, and let's get over to the conversation. Awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4 of the Carlson Cards podcast. So this episode I'm freaking ecstatic about. So Lauren, LFG Goalie 31 on Instagram, was willing to come on here and chat cards, her collection. And selfishly, I really want to learn about patches and autographs. And she seems to me like the queen of patches and autos. She says that's not accurate, or to some extent, but I feel looking at her collection, it's incredible and a lot to learn from. So first of all, Lauren, how are you doing? And again, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Austin. I've really enjoyed listening to your episode so far. The insights and the collectors you have on, it's just so entertaining to hear their stories. True collectors. That's where the hobby's at.
I appreciate you saying that. That's a good way to put it, because that's when I think of you. I think of a true collector. Like just looking at your page and from us chatting, it's like you've been doing this for a long time. You believe in your cards, and it's like so refreshing to see. It's awesome. So I was going to ask, so for those who aren't familiar with you, would you mind maybe sharing your high level like origin story when it comes to cards?
All right. Yeah. I mean, sports has always been a part of my life from a little kid. I grew up in a sports family. We went to we had season tickets to professional hockey games when I was a kid. We're a big Yankee household. So Susan Womack, John Sterling, they were always on the radio watching a Yankee game. Big Yankee fan. So yeah, I collected as a kid, and just like everyone else, life sort of takes over, different interests. But I really came back into the hobby, I would say around 2010. And really what precipitated it was in my Christmas stocking, I got a couple packs of cards. And like, yeah, I knew what cards were. I had collected as a kid in the 90s. My big chase card back then was the Upper Deck Griffey Rookie. Never ended up pulling it out of a pack, but man, did I try. So when I opened these packs in 2010, I couldn't believe how cards had evolved over the years. It was really interesting. I got patch cards, shiny refractor type cards. I couldn't believe it. So I immediately hit eBay and I started looking and researching, and it was amazing how things had just changed since I was a kid. Not only the cards themselves, but the prices of cards. I remember being able to take, a $20 allowance, run to the card store, and card stores. I mean, I must have had 5 within a half hour radius of the house. You go anywhere and find a local card shop, and you'd come home with a handful of packs and have a great day, ripping packs, sorting, penny sleeving, looking them up in the Beckett book, and trying to build your sets with your friends. So I ended up, after I got these packs in my stocking, I ended up going to a local card shop, made really good friends with the owner, and I entered into my first break. I had no idea what a break was. I had never seen it online on YouTube, but I had a blast. It was 2010 certified football. What a great product that was. It had your rookies and everything, and that was like that was the Sam Bradford rookie
Okay,
class.
I was gonna say it's a weak class though, right? I can't think of anyone in 2010. The Topps Chrome set's incredible, but I can't. Is that Tim? No, Tim Tebow's. Yeah,
Tim
2010.
Tebow.
Okay,
Yep.
there we go. I got
Yep.
one. I got one player in the set.
So yeah, that was our first break, and there was a core group of us that just made it a weekly gathering where we'd go every Friday night. We'd put together a break, and we'd just have an awesome time at the card shop. And to this day, those friends that I made at the card shop, they're friends for life in the hobby for me. Whenever we go to shows, we always message each other. We always look for each other at the shows. So, the hobby has really given back to me in that sense. It's, you have personal friends, you have your work friends, you have your family, but then you have your hobby family and friends.
I love that you're touching on that because that's something I'm realizing more and more as I've been into this. Again, this is like going on year 3, so I'm a total still beginner, but learning a lot every day. But like that's something that's really over time, especially doing this now. It's like I have never, we've never met. I've never seen you face to face until now. But it's like you can just shoot the crap, and it's like it's
You
the funnest
already
thing
have
ever.
something in common with one another. You
Correct.
don't
Yeah.
have that to find that commonality and have to, find an interest you each like. You already have that. You already have cards, regardless of what sport it is or what type of cards you collect. There's an innate commonality and common language you can start talking right off the bat.
I love that. Yeah, that's such a good way to put it. I appreciate that. Lauren, so I was gonna, if you don't mind, I had to steal a screenshot from your Instagram. So for those listening on the podcast, you won't see it, but basically, I mean, I'm looking at Kobe RPA, Larry Bird RPA, tons of Tom Brady patches, Lou Lou Gehrig patch. Um, I was wondering, so based off that origin story and everything, what led you to going down this road of like patches and autographs? And it seems like a lot of Hall of Famers. Like for myself, I'm more of so far I'm a beginner. The shiny cards have really appealed to me. I'd love to hear what led you down this path.
So, wow, my card collection has evolved over the years quite a bit. So when I first got back and we were doing breaks every week, I took a step back after a while, and flipping through my box, I realized I had a lot of cards that didn't mean a lot to me. I had a variety of cards, variety of sports, and I really wanted to find something a collection that meant something to me that I wanted to keep. Breaking's really fun. It's entertaining. It brings people together. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's a lottery. And most of the time you're ending up with cards that, are disposable, I guess is a good way to put it. They're not, most of the time you're not hitting like your grail in a break. You're getting, what falls to you. And you asked earlier about, my experience playing hockey and whatnot. I found, I was the only female at the shop, and I found I quickly had to get knowledgeable about breaks because they were draft breaks. So you had to have a good knowledge and know what you were picking, or else you were going to go home with a bag of peanuts at the end of the night. And I'll tell you, I learned most from my mistakes, but I think playing sports growing up, especially playing hockey, if you wanted to play hockey and you were a girl, you had to play with boys. Mm-hmm. That's where you got competitive. And I think always feeling as though I had to be ultra prepared, ultra on top of things and ready. I took that experience from hockey and kind of just brought it into the card world and at the card shop, that I knew on Friday nights when we were having a draft, at the end of the night, I'd have a mental image of all the cards that were drafted. And I'd go home and I'd go on eBay and say, did I make the right decisions? Why was this card picked in this order? Why did he pick this one over this one? So at the end of the night, I'd kind of do like the eBay search and all right, now I understand the value, why this is valued over this card, because it's game worn patch and it's not player used, or it's an on card auto versus a sticker auto. So that kind of stuff you just learn through experience. There's no other way. At the time, there wasn't a lot out there for YouTube. There wasn't a lot to research other than eBay. But it was experience, going through breaks, talking to, other collectors. Oh, why did you pick this card over this card? So I think all that knowledge and taking a step back and reevaluating my collection and how I was spending money, because frankly, funds are limited. Your card fund is limited. So you want to make the most of it. So I took a step back and I said, okay, what makes me happy are players that I enjoyed watching growing up, or players that meant something to my family. I'd hear stories. from my parents about watching the Yankees legends, Lou Gehrig, Roger Maris, Mickey Mantle. I wish I grew up in a time where I could watch those players live. I mean, those are just great players. And when I sit back and think, what great players have I lived through today that 50 years from now they're going to be talking about? And I feel it's the Tom Brady, Kobe Bryant, Larry Bird, those are the legends that, are going to get passed down to my kids or my grandkids that, my parents were telling me about that they watched growing up. So I did a complete U-turn. I kind of, went away from the breaks and more towards purchasing singles. And there was a while there where there was kind of a letdown. You have that high when you're in a break. Not only you have the high when you're opening packs or opening boxes and seeing what comes out, then you get a secondary high when the order of the break comes out. What order am I picking? And now you're transitioning to buying singles. But I've learned that the chase is as great a high as it is in breaking, getting the card in the mail, opening the mail day, trying to take the perfect picture of the card, posting it on Instagram. So I just found a new avenue to get that same high out of, that I had when I was breaking.
That's an awesome way to put it. I've never heard that parallel, but it's got to be close. Again, I wasn't somebody who ever got into the breaking. I think thankfully for myself, because I just don't have a lot of interest. But the fact that you could find that replacement in a way that sounds like financially was probably more savvy for yourself and everything. That's awesome. And again, what I was getting at, though, a great way to put it, right? The mail days. We all know that feeling. Like there's nothing else like it. I know my wife would always say, "You're not even that excited when I get home. Like, why are you?" It's kind of funny, but that's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. I was going to ask too, off of one of the things you had said there. So like, it sounds like family is huge to you. It sounds like sports are huge to you. Could you elaborate how that's been collecting maybe with them around? Like, have you been able to share that with them, especially having heard those stories and go to maybe your parents or your siblings, say, like, remember that Lou Gehrig story you were telling me about? Well, I just got a patch from a game he played in or a jersey he played in. Like, how has that been for you?
I think one of the most satisfying parts of the hobby is being able to share it with people, whether they be family or friends. To 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 have the hobby in a vacuum, yes, yeah, at the end of the day, we all enjoy cards, we enjoy collecting, but there's so much joy in sharing your cards with someone. And most of the times I show my family or friends, they look at it as a piece of cardboard with a picture of a sports player on it. But inevitably, when you show them the card, they're like, "Oh, I remember that game that they played and this happened." And you hear the story. And not only do they remember the game they watched, but they remember where they were during when they watched that game, what they were doing when they were watching that game, who they were with, what was happening in the world at that time. I mean, it's almost like you're getting a history lesson just from showing somebody a card. It sparks all these memories, and it's so interesting to hear that. And even showing my friends who have zero interest, and I think they placate me by saying, "Wow, that's an awesome card." you know, they're still sports fans and they still appreciate sports. And they'll say, "Oh, that's a really cool Brady. Do you know what game that patch was from?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no clue. It's game. It says it's game worn." My fingers are crossed that the card companies are telling the truth there. But it inevitably sparks a conversation about, "Oh, do you remember when we were together watching, the Atlanta Patriots game when they came back in the Super Bowl?" Like, something always comes back to a memory we shared together. And I think that's a really fun part of the hobby.
Yeah, that is really, really cool. I like how you shared that because, and for some of us like myself, it's like I feel like I've been able to thankfully find that through Instagram. But then it's always sweet when you have, your father-in-law's like,
Mhm.
"Oh, that card," or my dad's like, "Oh, that's really cool." It is really, really awesome. So to kind of expand on this a little bit, I asked Instagram for help for some question ideas. I just mentioned I have a big Brady collector coming on, and Ephus Pitch had a good idea. So he kind of asked the question of like, what is your motivation to collect? And I think you touched on it a little bit. Um, I think I'll even expand this further. So motivation in the sense of like, where's your end game with cards? Does that kind of make sense? Like you're collecting today. Do you have an idea of where you want to be 5 years from now, and what kind of motivates that idea?
At the heart of it, I believe I am a true collector. But in that same breath, do I want all my cards to go to value zero? No, that's probably not the greatest thing. But I think my motivation or end game is to really have cards that are different, that stand out, and to be known as, wow, this person has a really good Brady collection, or this person has, a great Patrick Waugh collection. If I have questions, or if I want to share a story or share cards or trade or whatever, I want to be that person that comes to mind when they think of that. um, and I think that goes back to when I was breaking and I just had no rhyme or reason or organization to the cards I had. It was a menagerie of different cards, just no sense of organization. And that's really when I took a step back and I said, well, Derek Jeter's my favorite baseball player growing up. That was the Yankee I grew up watching. My parents grew up watching these other great Yankee legends. I grew up with Jeter. So it was just a natural progression for me to want to go look for Jeter cards. Same thing with Tom Brady. I didn't grow up watching Montana or, Roger Staubach or some of those other great quarterbacks. I grew up watching Brady locally. So it only made sense that to commemorate some of those memories of watching the game on Sunday with my family and friends, I have cards to remind me of those memories. So I'm not looking to cash out anytime soon. This is my collection. There are some cards that I'm hoping I'm going to be buried with. And whether they go to value zero or they keep increasing in value, I just love the card itself, the aesthetics of the card, and the memory the nostalgia that it reminds me of when I look at it all the time.
It really sounds like I can feel that you lead with the nostalgia in every, question you've answered so far. And I feel that. And I think that's such a, I shouldn't say underrated because I think a lot of people mention it, but like every collector so far I talked to the fifth episode guest this morning, and I talked to you later, which is kind of funny. But every single person so far, it's been, I have this memory of going to this game or this nostalgia or my fan. It's like just so cool. I love that. And like, I can tell now it's like, if I want one day to have a collection like yours or like, Chris Hodge or whoever else I've talked to, it's like, maybe you just lead with that. Maybe good things happen. I appreciate you sharing all of this. Um, One thing I wanted to ask, kind of follow up from what you've talked about, maybe with values a little bit. So I know we're in 2023. It's not the market of 2020 or 2021. I own Brady cards. You own Brady cards. I'm having a lot of fun being able to grab them cheaper. I mean, it's great, right? And luckily, I've been able to find some at decent price and they're available. But what's your take on the market? Especially, I'm just going to point out Tom Brady here for 2023. How do you feel? Like, are you okay with it going down? You can grab more. Like, what's kind of your mindset? What are you thinking?
It's funny because, yeah, it is a great time to buy. I've certainly taken advantage of that. I'm finding the more common cards, yes, the values have gone down. Certain Brady rookies, it's a good time to buy.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm going after jumbo multicolor game worn patches of Brady, it's almost like there's a record, like a new high being set and I'm losing out. To me, I feel as though I'm putting a monster bid on it and I'm losing out at the last second. So I think the collectors are still in the hobby. The collectors haven't left. And I think some of these cards, they're probably turning over a little bit, whether they were flippers in the hobby, just people moving on from cards, or just, what we do as collectors, we try and level up and consolidate and move some cards to move into a bigger card or a bigger grail that we're looking for. I'm finding some of those cards that I've been eyeing, the market's not down on those cards. The market's very, very strong, and I get surprised every time I lose out on a card.
I will absolutely second that. It's very funny because I asked the question probably expecting what you say here, where it's the cards we're going for not going down, but everything else apparently is going. It's just crazy. But I guess to some extent, maybe you feel the same way. It's like that probably means I'm going in the right direction. If we're in a sports card pyramid, you got your base cards at the bottom, and then moving up to the top, you have the uber rare stuff. Seems like all the collectors are scrambling to get to this uber rare stuff, the game use patches, the shields, that I'm sure we're going to touch on in a second. So I guess no question, but just a statement. What are your thoughts on that? Would you agree with that?
Totally agree. I think, especially when I first got back into the hobby in 2010, there was one central location to buy cards. It was eBay.
Mm-hmm.
Now I find, I pull up my iPad and I must have tons of tabs going across. I got my eBay tab. I got my golden tab, my PWCC tab. I mean, you could go on and on. There's so many different avenues now to purchase cards. Facebook, Instagram. I mean, I think the opportunities are out there. I still love going in person to card shows and getting deals done in person. My favorite method of acquiring a card is via trade. Mm-hmm. And primarily that's going to be an in-person type situation. So I love going in person. I love trading cards. I think it's just a great time in the hobby. I don't see it as a down hobby. Do I see it as maybe leveling off? Maybe, but I think the collectors that were in the hobby pre-COVID, we're still here. And we're still, carrying the hobby strong, if not stronger. I think it's going to be interesting to see the transition with Panini and Fanatics. I've, in the back of my mind, there's certain cards that I'm trying to acquire before there's a transition, just because of the uncertainty out there. But I think that's exciting, that uncertainty. I want to see what brands Fanatics may bring back, what Topps brands they may bring back. I'm excited for the hobby. I feel like it's never been better.
I fully agree with you. And so this kind of really ties in. I'm going to ask you another question that's very related to this. So Ryan Cratch on Instagram, I think I butchered that, but I'm sorry, Ryan. He asked what your thoughts would be on them being Fanatics coming in, repurposing some of these old sets. I think the question is geared towards, do you feel like that's going to drive demand back to the old ones? I'm wondering the same thing, right? It's interesting because I hope there's not, maybe you'll defer, but I hope there's not more Brady gold refractors and stuff. Like, I hope they kind of let him be, but you might disagree, and I'd love to hear that. I think there's going to be interest, and I think people will go look back. Does that mean prices go up? That's not for me to say. I don't have the crystal ball, but I'd love to hear your take on that. And again, if you think the demand for these old ones will go up once people kind of learn more about the sets.
I think for sure there's going to be a renewed demand for the original Topps brands and even early Panini releases. First year, there could be I won't say an obscure product, but some sleeper Panini products, first year select. Those are those designs are awesome on select. First year Spectra. Those card stocks are so thick in Spectra. They're great looking cards. The shine on them is awesome. I think, especially the unknown, one of the big unknowns, are they going to have, player worn materials in their cards, or are they going to have game used? I think that's going to just spark a renewed sense to go back and appreciate, perhaps what we may have overlooked at the time, and realize the rarity of what we had and appreciate that more.
It's funny you touched on the kind of like underwritten or undersold sets too, because I feel like I agree with you, right? There's going to be those gems, and there needs to be those gems in the rough that were not people tossed to the side, because that's every like iconic set in history. I feel like that was the story. It was like, this wasn't the popular product, or like you mentioned, like 2010 certified. It's like, I'm familiar with the set, not super detailed, but like that's just stuff that comes to mind. It's like nobody thinks of that era of cards, and it's very, Very interesting.
2010 select certified football was so underrated. It had a subset. It was called the Immortals. And
Oh, this is so weird. Can I say something? So I
yes,
just interviewed a guy named Chris for my 5th episode. He kept talking about Immortals, and I don't think it's the same thing, but I just had like I just got chills because you're saying that. I bet you're going to say something very similar. Sorry, go ahead.
it was patch autos of legend players, game worn patch autos. They were awesome. They were action photos. Some of them were black and white photos, but they were awesome. They were definitely chase cards in that. You were more excited to pull one of those than you were Sam Bradford RPA or
Mhm.
Tim Tebow RPA. Those designs were awesome. Great subset.
I love the idea of an immortal too, and that's where I got chills because I was just talking to Chris about this, and his thing is that's who I collect is immortals, and like that's what I feel from you looking. It's like every player I see that you have is an immortal, and like I just love that word. I'm gonna totally run with that from now on
That's
and collect
awesome.
that way. So Lauren, out of respect for your time, I just want to make sure that we can fully cover your Mount Rushmore because I'm sure there's gonna be so many cool stories here. So I'm gonna swap over to my screen here. And just a quick reminder, so on YouTube, they'll be able to see this, but if you could just, as you maybe step through each card, describe what the card is to someone who's just listening and can't see it so they know what they're looking at, or I guess listening to.
All right. I had a lot of internal struggles with this. Sending you these pictures, I went back and forth so many times that I actually had to cheat in one of the pictures and send you a 3-in-1. So I guess I'll start with the hockey. Patrick Waugh. He was my idol growing up. I emulated his style of play. I thought he was such an awesome character in the game. Every game you could tell he put his emotions on the line every game. He played with finesse. I mean, he was always flashing glove saves. It was never, a casual thing. He'd always have to make the over dramatic. And I love that about him. The reason I picked this particular card of his, I pulled it personally from a box of the Cup. The Cup is my favorite hockey product. Upper Deck hockey, you cannot. I wish Upper Deck would come back to football. Upper Deck is awesome. The design, the patches, just great product. Everything in hockey is game used. Mostly everything in hockey is game used. So this card, it's a scripted stick from the Cup. So it's a piece of his game used stick, and he autographed it. The reason I love this card so much, not only because I personally pulled it from the local card shop on one of those weekly break nights, is because I emulated him so much. In high school, I actually purchased his pads, his hockey leg pads,
Wow.
so I could even look like him. Yeah, weird, I know.
No,
So
that's cool. No, I think it's cool. That's cool.
I have these exact pads that he's wearing in the picture, and then his stick. All you can see are the letters EV, but
Mhm.
he wore all his equipment was Coho, and he had a Coho Revolution stick. So the EVs from the word Revolution, and I used to use his same Coho Revolution stick. I just felt like, yeah, I pulled my favorite player from my favorite product, and it was the image of him that I felt like I was almost looking in a mirror. I wish that were me, looking like
So
that
cool.
with the stick that I used, the same pads that I bought to look like him when I played in high school. So that was a night of nights for me, opening that card from a pack.
That's incredible, and it's really funny because I'm gonna misquote you here, but it's something along the lines of, "Yeah, with breaks, it's really hard to pull that card you really want." Well, it looks like the universe or God gifted you this one, so that's really cool.
Yeah, I just remember, opening it up and pulling it, and everyone in the shop knew he was my favorite player,
Oh my
and
gosh.
it wasn't a big hockey contingent in the shop. So when I pulled it, I was speechless, and everyone behind me watching me was jumping up and down. They were more excited than I was. It was just a memory in time that's going to stick in my head for forever, I hope.
That's so cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
I'll move to the Derek Jeter card. I picked this because, like I said before, he was the Yankee legend I grew up watching. When I look at this card, I just think of those iconic moments. I think of the flip to home plate when they played the Athletics to get Giambi out at home plate. I think of him running into catching a foul ball on the third baseline, running into the stands, coming up bloodied face. I think of where I was when I watched him hit his 3,000th hit, his home run. Um, looking at this card, and his swing was such an iconic swing. And then what really struck me about this card when I purchased it was it's a one of one logo man, but the baseball logo man. So it's got the black, white, and gray, the team colors, and just knowing that it was on a uniform that he wore in a game. Um, I can only imagine which game it was. And maybe it was one of these iconic moments I'm talking about. Who knows? But you know, the feelings I get when I see this card and the images of his iconic moments in sports, just that's why I love looking at this card.
Quick question for you on this too. I know Brady shield cards very, very, very limited game use, particularly just because football is only 16 games now, 17 games a season. How does that stand for baseball? How rare is a card like this? Truly, I have no clue. So that's what I wanted to know.
I've seen a handful of Derek Jeter, the one of one logo mans. Most recently, I've seen them in the Dynasty set, the Topps Dynasty. Um, what criticism I hear with Topps is the ambiguity with the wording on their cards,
Mm-hmm.
right? So here you can't see it, it's really small print, but right next to the one of one it says game used memorabilia. But if you flip the card over and you look at the fine print, and this is on all Topps cards, even Topps Brady cards I have, the front where the actual pieces of memorabilia are, it will say game used, but then the back says, oh, this isn't it from any specific event or game. So they don't really identify it. But I think for purposes of game use, it to me, it still checks the box. It's still prominent on the front of the card that it's game used memorabilia. But yeah, I think most recently the Topps Dynasty set has put in some of his logo men. It's put in pieces of his cleat with the jump man, or pieces of his batting glove with the jump man, which is so awesome. I love how he wore that product later in his career.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing.
I think the next one I'll go to is the Babe Ruth card. With knowing what I knew about Tom Brady patches, and like you brought it up a second ago, the limited number of games and how limited those patches can be, I kind of thought back to, okay, well, I like Yankee Legends, and I really haven't dipped my toe yet into the vintage market, but I felt a connection to buying game used Yankee Great cards. So this is a game used Babe Ruth. It's from Upper Deck. Again, I love Upper Deck products. It's numbered out of 5, and it's the patch window spells out Babe, but each patch window has a piece of the Yankee pinstripe in it. What you'll see a lot in Babe Ruth patches is just, the gray or the beige faded colored patch or a piece of jersey. But I always look for the piece that has a pinstripe running through. I think that's awesome. I think the pinstripe is so, when you think of pinstripes and you think of Yankees when you hear pinstripes. So looking at this card, it reminds me of, players that my parents idolized and my grandparents probably watched growing up. I think one day I will start dipping my toe into vintage, but this is my entry point in getting some game used of the Yankee Legends. So
That's
I thought this card kind of represented that piece of my collection.
amazing. And I was gonna ask, so off of that, sorry to interrupt you. Um, how much of your collection has been like segued off of other things? Like it seems like you had even mentioned yourself just now. I was familiar with the game used, I was into it, and then I looked at this. Like, would you say a lot of your collecting journey has kind of been starting in one spot and then spreading out and using your knowledge to kind of help you develop your collection? Is that pretty accurate to say?
That's 100%. I think especially when you look at a card and say, well, what's this card in baseball, or does this great have a set similar to this, and what does that look like? um and the point you brought up about the rarity of game used material, especially in football where there's a limited number of games, I thought the same thing. Today's baseball, they play what, 160 games plus you have a 40 game pre. All right, so maybe game used memorabilia today isn't as rare, but back then those seasons were not as long. There were a fraction of the number of teams that there are today. So I thought, the rarity in a game used Babe Ruth pinstripe is pretty cool. And I don't know how many game used Babe Ruth jerseys are on the market for a card company to purchase just to rip up and put into cards.
And if there was, I bet you it would have been on the Golden Touch, and we would have
Yeah,
heard about it.
for sure.
No, that's super cool. Something you mentioned there too, I had never thought of. I just want to make sure I restate that. Back in the vintage, like you said, there were way less teams, especially like I think too for NFL, it just makes sense what you just said
Mhm.
too. That's really intriguing. So it doesn't mean that because there's less team, Babe Ruth has less stuff. But I guess what I'm saying is what you just shared is like overall these vintage greats, there's just, I mean, less to begin with that will ever be on the market because there's less that exist out there.
100%. Yeah, I've tried to. So Babe Ruth is probably like the center. And then I've branched off. Okay, Babe Ruth, he was a Yankee legend. What other Yankee legends have I heard, my family talk about? So I have a bunch of Mickey Mantle game used. I've started to go off into some of the, I won't say lesser known, but Maris, Gehrig, Thurman Munson. I've started to go down those avenues and try and get game used pieces from them as well. I think it's just, again, when I look at the cards, I don't have any recollection of watching a game, obviously, but I have a recollection of the stories that my family would say, and their reaction to seeing that player on a card. So that really hits home with me.
Awesome. Yeah, like we've mentioned, back to the nostalgia, back to the, like you said, your motivation with the family. Super, super cool. So I gotta ask, what the heck are these Brady's? I feel like I've seen them before and they're setting auction records. I think Kevin has maybe one of these. That's where I've seen these before.
So I saved this one to last. I think this is one of my favorite stories, my favorite hobby stories. It didn't start out that way, but now looking back, I can appreciate it more. So the three cards on screen here are from the 2014 Flawless set, which was the first year of Flawless, and they're game worn patch autos of Tom Brady. I have the out of 5 Emerald version, the out of 10 Gold version, and the out of 15, sorry, Ruby version. There's also an out of 25 silver version. I don't have that one. I believe that's the one Kevin has.
Okay.
But
And
Kevin
Kevin, for
used
everyone listening, is the Captain37 on Instagram. I think that's one of our mutual friends. So that's why I
definitely.
just thought of him right away.
Yep. So he will come up in my story here. But the first of these three that I acquired was the Emerald out of 5. I went to I think it was my second national. I want to say it was in Cleveland, Ohio. And, we were there. I was there with Kevin and some other friends. And walking around, I saw this card in a showcase and it immediately caught my eye. It wasn't something I had ever seen before. And it was right after Flawless had come out. I knew Flawless was a high-end product, but it didn't have National Treasures was always seemed to be the top echelon product in football. Flows hadn't grasped that foothold yet in football. So I think this was very shortly after this product came out that we were at the National, and I saw this card and I'm like, oh, Flawless, I don't know. That could be just a one-off Panini. Like, what if Panini stops making it after 1 or 2 years? We don't know how it's going to turn out. But when I looked at it, I was like, this is awesome. It's a piece of the Elvis logo. It's on card. I think the image pops. The card design is really cool. So I'm at the booth, and the the dealers of the booth did not give me the time of day. It was like I was the only one at the booth, and whether they thought I was window shopping or just, passing along. So I remember standing there for the longest time, and they're talking to each other. They're on their cell phone. So finally I caught, we made eye contact, and I asked them about the card. It was priced. I gave them a counter offer on the card, and without hesitation, they're like, yep, good, sold. So I was like, ooh, maybe I should have offered a little less. So I get the card, and as I hand over my money, they hand the card over, and as I'm walking away, I can hear the two of them kind of doing the giggle, like, oh, we got one over on her. So I'm walking away now, and now I'm doubting myself. I'm like, oh my God, I overpaid for this. I literally spent 90% of my budget on this one card. It was day one of the National. So I go back to Kevin, and I'm like, I think I made a mistake. He's like, no, you like the card. You're good. You're fine. So, went through the National. Fast forward today. I couldn't be more thankful that I made that decision. That card literally it's a cornerstone of my Brady PC, and it's kicked off so many different avenues. So not shortly after, I saw the out of 10 version on eBay. And the out of 10 versions of the Flawless, they're typically always nameplates. So I don't know if that's a piece of the B or the piece of the D in his name. So I saw that on eBay, and I'm like, oh, this will be cool to pair up with the Emerald version. Let me snag that. So I snagged that, and, prices on these at the time are pennies on the dollar of what they're now. So now I have the out of 5 and out of 10 version. Last year, our card family gets together, and Kevin has the out of 15 version, and I had some Brady cards that he was interested in. So that out of 15 version was acquired on pure trade. It was trading Brady cards for Brady cards. And like I said earlier, my favorite types of transactions is trading. I'll rather trade all day long. And I know, dealers like rather have cash. Cash is king. But some of the most fun you can have in the hobby is when you trade with another collector, because you get to hear, why they're trading something, why they want to trade for something, rationale, and going back and forth. Okay, you put this card in, you take this card out, and you're just trying, like, the fun of making the trade even. And at the time when we're doing this trade, I think one had sold off on either Golden or PWCC for over $100,000. So it wasn't a small trade. We're trading massive cards. And the best part was not one single dollar was involved.
That's so cool. I love hearing that. And it's like amazing for, I guess, on both sides of things too, right? I'm sure Kevin got cards he wanted, and you got cards, obviously a card you wanted. And then now you guys I just love the idea of the fact that you got it from somebody, like I have cards from Kevin or cards from other people where it's like, these aren't leaving my collection. I remember exactly who this came from. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's such an awesome feeling when you connect back to what we talked about, like making the connections with people and then the cards too. That's so cool.
Yeah, and when we were finished, we both agreed there were certain cards in the deal that, were really special to us that we were giving up in the trade. So we had that handshake deal. Hey, if you ever move this card, can you just offer it back to me first before you move it outside of your collection? So it's that mutual respect you have for one another, and you got to find the right trade partner to do it with, and have trust and faith in that person that it's going to be fair and equitable for both of you.
Well, and especially to your point, like with cards like this, or I'm sure the Brady's you had too, I would just have to guess they don't pop up very often. So it's not like you're looking at a Beckett magazine and saying, "Oh, this is $100, this is 200, let's make this even," right? And I think, like again, to your point, you guys probably had to be very fair with each other and have faith that they don't have extra knowledge that you don't know about. Where for some reason this card's way less than what it looks like it should be, and that sort of thing. That's just great. You're able to make it happen. And my God, this trio is incredible. And you'll have to get that fourth one. That'll be really cool.
Maybe a future trade down the road.
That's awesome. And I guess I wanted to throw one point out from your story that I really liked too. Again, it sounds like your favorite hobby story. The best part about that was you believed in the card and you held on to it. Like props to that, because that is awesome. Because I know that feeling where like you get the card and then you question it and then you're like, oh, maybe I just sell it and I get 80% of what I bought it for and whatever. But you didn't, and I'm sure it's now, like you said, it was pennies ultimately of what this thing is now worth. That's so cool. So Lauren, if you don't mind, could we end with like a fast five? These are like kind of five quicker questions that hopefully are interesting and kind of fun.
Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. So first one, I just thought of this because I didn't touch on it all. What's your number one straightforward tip for somebody beginning to want to be interested in patches? Like maybe myself, I've never owned a patch, which is absurd to say, but I've never, I guess, owned in my collection. Do you have any like number one tip for doing that?
My number one tip would be talk to somebody, talk to another collector that has patches. And again, it's someone that's going to have more knowledge than you. I always consult other people. If I see a patch on eBay and I'm like, does this look too good to be true based on its numbering? Like I'll take a screenshot and send it to one of my friends on Instagram. Like, what do you think of this? And, if I get the, I'm staying away from it. Or if I get the, yeah, that makes sense. I've seen other similar type patches with that number. I'm like, okay, good. I feel more comfortable. I think having friends in the hobby that you can trust their opinion and rely on them for advice is the number one piece of advice I can give.
That's awesome. It probably applies to any question regarding the hobby too.
For
That's
sure.
really cool. It's crazy the amount of cult knowledge too. Now that you say that, though, like we have our like Peyton group chat, and it's like funny when someone posts a really cool patch and they're like, "Hey, what about this one?" And then other people are like, "No, that's a fake. It's been going around for 6 years." And it's like, wow, I probably would have bought in the card without knowing.
Right. The collective knowledge between everyone who collects that specific player, it would be it would seem odd to me that not one person would know something about that particular card between all the collective years worth of knowledge. So that, yeah, that's the best part of Instagram and social media is bringing, like you said, player specific or genre specific group chats together to get like-minded people together. And it's not a competition. It's more sharing knowledge and helping one another out in the hobby.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing. So next one, number two here. If you were starting a bar softball league and you can resurrect any deceased player to be on your bar softball league team, who are you taking? And I'm assuming it's going to be a Yankee, I'd have to imagine.
I would really like Mickey Mantle. There was not too recently, there was a piece that went out to auction. I think it was a golf card that he had, later on in his career, he had written on, and it's something I can't repeat because it's adult themed, but it just goes to show you like these players are human. These players, yes, we looked at them as superheroes, legends of the game, but at the end of the day, they're human. And I could tell from what he wrote, he had to be a really fun guy to be around in the dugout. Like, I'm sure he made his teammates laugh and, just have a really good time, especially when you're winning.
I love the direction you ran with it. That's perfect. That's kind of what I was getting at. Besides being a good player who would be fun, that's perfect. Thank you. Um, So next question too, what's your favorite hockey game you played in, whether in high school or at college? Is there one that comes to mind that's like, that was the best, the pinnacle of your hockey career?
Probably off the top of my head, I would have to say in high school, my senior year, we had moved up a division, and we were getting smoked every game, like smoked. We're in over our heads, and this game we're playing the number one team,
Mm-hmm.
and you always, when you're a good team, the fear is you always play down to your competition. Well, man, we must have played up to ours that game. We were tied 1-1, probably with 5 minutes left. We ended up losing the game, but wow, what a game we played. And it just stuck in my mind, like any given day, like that saying, you take it for granted, but the number one team against a bottom team, and we had nothing to lose. I mean, we weren't making the playoffs. We were getting killed every game. Outplayed is an understatement. And this team, they had everything to lose, to look bad, and and play a close, tight game to a bottom team. I'm sure that was very humbling for them.
And a great feeling for you guys on the other side. That's really cool. So as the new 23 sports cards has kind of a fun one, what's the favorite country you visited? And if you haven't left the country, maybe favorite state.
Oh, I love going north and skiing in the wintertime. I think after I got out of college and kind of stopped playing competitively, I needed something to do. So I took up skiing,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if it's the cold weather, the ice hockey, the skiing kind of theme. But I love going to New Hampshire and skiing out, the fresh air, walking into the cabin with the fireplace and your toes numb, you can't feel them. I love that. It reminds me of when I was a kid playing hockey.
That's awesome. No, it's funny how that runs. I'm from Wisconsin too, so just I love the cold weather, and people think that's so crazy, but it definitely, I think, runs in our blood. I'm not sure. um,
Definitely.
Final question. So if you could only collect patches or only collect autographs, no art, no duels. We're talking one or the other. What are you taking for the rest of your collecting career?
Assuming that they're on card autos and game worn patches.
Bingo. Yeah,
All
we'll say
right.
that.
I will take the patches. I think there's so much variety in a patch card. The place, the where the patch is pulled from. Is it pulled from, an equipment shield? Is it pulled from a logo, the logo man? Is it pulled from, the Elvis tip of the Patriots? I mean, I can't imagine if Brady had patches in a Buccaneers uniform with the Buccaneer ship. Those patches would be insane. So I would take patches over autos, believe it or not.
I had a feeling you'd say that. I guess the other thing too I was thinking was patches get you closer to the game. Like autos are kind of after the fact. So that's cool. That's a good answer. Awesome. Well, Lauren, again, I super thankful you've been on here and you chose to join me here. I really appreciate it. And for those listening, obviously follow Lauren on Instagram. Her name is in the title of the video or podcast link. Any closing thoughts? Anything to say to the audience?
Austin, I had a great time talking. Congratulations on your podcast and your degree.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Best of luck in work and in life. And I can't wait to keep listening to collectors you have on your podcast.
Thanks. Really appreciate it. I hope we can connect in person this year at some point.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Austin.